Hi, I'm Nicholas Lee, and my presentation is on cholera. Some background information. Approximately 1.3 million to 4 million cases of cholera and 21,000 to 143,000 deaths worldwide are due to cholera each year. The causative agent's formal name is Vibrio cholerae, and it falls under the family Vibrioceae. Some important contributors include Filippo Passini, Robert Koch, and John Snow. Filippo Passini was the first to discover Vibrio cholerae in 1854 when he performed autopsies on dead cholera patients. However, his research did not gain traction in the scientific community until Robert Koch came along in 1884, where he discovered the same Vibrio cholerae and popularized it. In 1854, John Snow also helped to prove that cholera outbreaks in Soho, London were caused by fecal contaminated water sources instead of bad odors. Vibrio cholerae is a gram-negative bacteria. It has a comma shape, and in terms of size, 1 to 3 micrometers by 0.5 to 0.8 micrometers. Its single flagella at the end allows it to be highly motile, and is also a facultative anaerobe, meaning that it can produce ATP via aerobic respiration and fermentation. There are also two serogroups, main serogroups, O1 and O139. These two serogroups are the main causes of cholera outbreaks. O1 lacks capsule, while O139 has a capsule. This picture demonstrates how Vibrio cholerae affects the body. When the bacteria enters the body through contaminated food or water, it adheres to and colonizes the small intestine. They then secrete cholera toxin, which binds to the plasma membrane of the intestinal epithelial cells, and they release an enzymatically active subunit that causes a rise in cyclic adenosine monophosphate, or CAMP production. The resulting high CAMP levels cause massive secretion of electrolytes and water into the intestinal lumen, leading to diarrhea and dehydration. For transmission, in Soho, London in 1854, the miasma theory was a common way for people to explain how disease spread. They believed that diseases like cholera were caused by bad smells. However, this theory later became obsolete by John Snow when he discovered that cholera was actually spread through waterborne and foodborne vehicle transmission. In the map, he mapped out the disease cases of cholera within the community of Soho, and he observed patterns of the disease that were centralized around this one particular water pump that was contaminated with fecal matter. The incubation period for cholera was around 1 to 3 days, and since the disease had an effect that made you lose large amounts of water, some of the symptoms included like diarrhea, fatigue and weakness, nausea and vomiting, dehydration, electrolyte imbalance, dry mouth, and weight loss. And if you go prolonged period of time without seeking treatment, dehydration can take over and lead to death. For diagnosis, there are 3 ways of detecting if somebody has cholera. The first being observing symptoms such as dehydration and electrolyte loss and weight loss. The stool of the patient can also be tested under a microscope for any signs of Vibrio cholerae. Also, in areas with limited or no laboratory testing, the rapid dipstick test can provide an early warning to public health officials that an outbreak of cholera is occurring. However, sensitivity and specificity of this test is not optimal. treatment. Rehydration is the most effective treatment for cholera. With clean water, you can replace lost fluids and electrolytes, and also antibiotics. They can reduce both the amount and duration of cholera-related diarrhea. Prevention can also be through vaccines. There's a vaccine for cholera called Vaxchora, and you can also avoid contamination by boiling your water, covering your food, etc. And proper hygiene and improvements of sewage system kind of ties into avoiding contamination by keeping your food and water safe. The main at-risk populations are crowded, impoverished areas of developing nations that lack proper water and sewage treatment systems. Children and elderly people with weak immune systems are also at risk. Areas such as Yemen and the Democratic Republic of Congo and India also fall into these areas. For past cases of cholera, there have been 7 pandemics involving cholera outbreaks. In the first pandemic in 1817 to 1824, the disease started in the Ganges River region and then spread to India. Soldiers and traders in the region carried it to Southeast Asia, Central Asia, Eastern Africa, and the Mediterranean. The second pandemic in 1828 to 1834 began in India and was taken by traders and merchants to Russia, Finland, Poland, and England. Irish immigrants then carried the disease to Canada, and it then entered the U.S. By 1838, cholera had reached New Orleans, and by 1833, it had journeyed to Mexico. In the third pandemic in 1852 to 1860, British troops coming from India carried cholera to Afghanistan, which spread to China, Iran, Asia, Africa, and Europe. Europeans then carried the bacteria to the east coast of the U.S., and in 1849, the California Gold Rush miners carried the disease to the Pacific coast in Mexico. The fourth pandemic in 1863 to 1879, it had traveling Muslim pilgrims from the Holy Land spreading cholera from the Ganges Delta to Saudi Arabia. From there, the disease spread to the Middle East, Africa, Western Europe, Russia, and the Americas. The fifth pandemic in 1881 to 1896 involved the disease spreading from India to Asia, Africa, South America, France, Russia, Germany, and Japan. The sixth pandemic in 1899 to 1823, the outbreak once again started in the Ganges River region and reached the Middle East, North Africa, and Russia. The seventh and final pandemic was in 1961 to 1970. This originated in Indonesia and spread across Asia, reaching Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. Today, cholera is not as prevalent as it was back then, as seen through the 7 pandemics. The US and other industrialized nations today rarely see cholera cases due to technological advancements in water treatment and sewage treatment. However, there are still areas that are affected. In this map, you can see in red the most prevalent being Yemen with 54,503 cases and 33 deaths reported. Coming in second is the Democratic Republic of Congo with 4,228 cases and 71 deaths reported. And lastly, Cameroon with 1,335 cases and 76 deaths reported. This is the end of my presentation on cholera. I have a list of my sources and references here. Thank you.